Exciting. That sounds really
Yeah.
exciting. Can you describe in your own words what you believe or define spirituality?
I define it as a co-creative relationship with the divine order. That's how I think about it. I experience spirituality is I experience it as a living, day-to-day, vital, conscious relationship with the spiritual dimension and with the spiritual hierarchy, which is vast. And there are certain aspects of that that I'm particularly attuned to. And my experience and how I define spirituality is a conscious, daily, working connection
I see.
with the spiritual dimension that informs and guides and facilitates my life more and more and more.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm an artist, local artist in Redmond, Washington, and this is my studio, my humble studio. I just moved into it actually recently, about a month ago, so I'm still getting set up and getting used to painting here. But this is primarily where I paint, because I need a big open space to do that and make a mess. But so much of art nowadays is happening in the computer, which is some of this work to the side, and so that happens more in an office space. It doesn't look much like a studio, so it's a little bit of both. It's the first draft, and I can tell from looking at it, because I'm experienced, that it has a lot of promise. It's probably going to be a great piece, but will be mostly unrecognizable when it's finished from what it is now. So
Okay,
I
do you
think
already-
very spontaneously and intuitively, and we'll start out with an idea, certainly. Always start out with an idea, but then, you know, painting for me is a very intuitive process. So as soon as I start, the thing just takes on a life of its own, and I start thinking, do this, do that, and it just takes off, and I have no idea where it's going to end up, and it usually ends up pretty great, and I'm happy with it. Well, I've painted for years in my house, and I have in my house, and I'd be happy to show it to you sometime if you would like to see it, as a fabulous collection of early and pre-20th century classical African sculpture. And the entire, and that is my ultimate source of inspiration for my art. And it is really that actually was the source of inspiration for most of the 20th century modern art movement in Europe. Cubism came, you know, many of Picasso pieces, if you look at those pieces and you're familiar with African sculpture at all, you can see that he derived his inspiration for the abstracted contours of the figure from classical African sculptors. They've been doing that for hundreds of years. So Picasso was inspired by that work, Modigliani was inspired by that work, and I happened to be fortunate enough to meet a friend who has been collecting it for 50 years and has sold me a few pieces over the years, so I have that and have always painted with that in my space. And that's, for me, that's the ultimate, I think, source of inspiration, mythological source, however you want to think about it, that informs my art. There's actually a great correlation between the conceptual basis of psychoanalysis and Egyptian cosmology. He was, I believe that psychoanalysis, whether psychoanalytic theory was informed by Egyptian cosmology. If you study the basis, Egyptian creation myths, etc., the theoretical constructs of psychoanalysis follow the archetypal pattern laid out in Egyptian cosmology that he basically applied to human psychology. Convinced that, Freud's, psychoanalysis is grounded, that theory is grounded in his understanding of Egyptian creation mythology, and he basically, applied that to how the human psyche develops. The process is very similar and identical, really. And so, yeah, I think that a lot of art, honestly, from my experience, is that most of modern art, if not a great deal of the impetus for the modern art movement of the 20th century and the development of psychoanalysis is inspired from African or Egyptian sources. And I don't think, I think we're going to find out over the coming century, it's going to become clear that Western civilization is much more grounded in pre-Grecian, African, Egyptian culture, grounded in that deeply prior to Greece. You know, the current thinking is that Western civilization comes primarily out of Greece, but I think that's not really the case, and that's coming clearer and clearer, and there are a number of people that are writing about that. And we're seeing our roots of Western civilization are much deeper and older than we thought, and very much grounded in Africa. This right here is called Three Dancers. And that is actually a piece of photography. When I was down on the Oregon coast, I stacked rocks up and made a little formation and took a picture of them. And then I brought the photograph home and isolated the rocks from the background of the rest of the photo and manipulated the whole thing in Photoshop and created that image to look like three dancing figures. You know, it was basically done with an original stack of three rocks that I. Now this piece is actually taken from, it's a photograph, but it's taken from 4 different paintings that I did in the spring of this year that I took pictures of, got the pictures into photograph and cut different pieces of them out and recollaged them back in together into one larger piece. So it's kind of it's an integration of 4 different paintings into one that I did in Photoshop. Paint on the canvas and get it really wet, and then I'll put newspaper on there. Technique that I smear paint all over the canvas and get a lot of paint on it, and then I'll lay a piece of newspaper over it and then pull the paper off, and then it's covered in paint. So it's a way to get a lot of paint onto a piece of newspaper in a hurry without actually painting, because I use these papers in my collages. I'll cut this up and include it in here, and I'll go all over the place. I did take Art 101 in college, and I have to tell you, I was so uninterested in what they were teaching that I thought that it might actually kill my interest in art, so I didn't take any more classes, and I thought, well, after taking that, I must not be an artist. I love talking to people about this, which I honestly don't do very often, because I'm pretty isolated as an artist, actually. Having a website is the first effort I've made to, step out beyond my, immediate sphere, and it's been that way for, 20-something years, and I think for me it was the right thing to do.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Well, I hope that you have found our guest, Denise Marts, as exciting and interesting as I have. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week on the New Age Paradigm.